In 1941, on the Eastern Front, the victorious Germans reached Stalingrad. After a devastating aerial bombardment, it was the task of the infantrymen to take the town. But the Germans had underestimated the resistance of the Russian soldier, defending his city block by block, street by street, house by house.
Thousands of sorties of our dive bombers, Stuka bombers, bombed the city, so there was so much rubble you couldn't, even with the tank, you could hardly move. Therefore, we formed small sections, especially fitted with submachine gun. Fighting in a street is a very dangerous affair, because behind any door, behind any window, even from the roof, you get some fire, there are snipers, and the enemy is in a shelter throwing hand grenades. You have to run very fast, or you have to creep. You have to depend on your neighbor. We went creeping and running and supporting one the other, and we threw hand grenades. We fired our submachine guns. So this action took weeks and weeks, and therefore our strength, the division faded out.
The courage and street fighting tactics of the Soviet soldiers finally wore down the endurance and skill of the world's most professional troops. The ruins of Stalingrad became the graveyard of the German Sixth Army. In most World War II campaigns, infantry bore the brunt of the fighting. They formed a quarter of the British Army, but suffered 3/4 of the casualties. The pressure of life in the line was relentless. In Omar Bradley's famous phrase, behind every river was another hill, and behind that hill, another river. Each encounter reduced the rifleman's chance of survival. Sooner or later, the chase had to end on a stretcher or in the grave. For the infantryman, the moment came all too often when he had to go forward into the firing line.
May the 23rd was the breakout from Anzio. And a few days before, we were called by the brigadier, and we sat down, and he was telling us, a wonderful moment has happened, we're going to break out of here, and your regiment has been chosen. And then suddenly I found that it was my platoon. It was to be the first to have to break out of Anzio. We had to go up to a river bank and hide there. And one of the men whom I most trusted, and who was actually our signals man, he just couldn't bear it any longer. I was very fond of him, but he shot himself through the foot. And so I lost him, and I lost our signals man. And it was a really terrible experience that somebody whom one was very fond of and who one trusted should do that and was betraying us. But luckily, our doctor gave me a Benzedrine, and I think I popped that in. It certainly made an awful lot of difference at the time. And I felt once one actually got going in this final attack, which was a diversionary attack, actually, and the main attack was made by the Americans further south. But you had a great sense of elation. I'm not sure whether it was the Benzedrine that gave me that feeling, but certainly I went across. Then I did this terrible thing. I led the platoon across some open ground and did something that was entirely against all the rules that I had been taught. And we went round, instead of going behind a German machine gun post, we went round in front. And of course, they were all mown down. Somehow I escaped. But it was a thing that weighed on my mind tremendously for years later.
Combat for the infantryman has always been dangerous and confusing. Ammunition Hill is on the outskirts of Jerusalem. In 1967, during the Six-Day War, it was honeycombed with trenches and bunkers and resolutely defended by the Jordanians. The close-range battle to take the hill was a microcosm of infantry combat.
The real problem is to identify where are you, who is shooting at you, from where. The moment you start to move in the shade of confusion, we were moving forward inside the trenches. Suddenly you discover that what you thought were friends of you who were going behind you were not, but your enemy that was going behind you, not knowing that actually you are ahead of him. And the question was, who would use his senses better to find out actually in every second and every minute of the fight what is actually happening around you. While fighting, you concentrate in what you're doing, you try to survive. And you're so busy doing it that you don't have anything else in your mind. There were few moments that were terrifying. First moment that actually you see with your own eyes that your close friends got killed. You see his face, you see his eyes, he's not moving. It's a terrible experience, terrible.
For all its intensity, battle is a comparatively rare event in the infantryman's life. Mostly he must trudge on, weighed down by rifle and pack.
A typical day in the field was usually a hot walk in the sun. You would go out on what they called an operation, combat operation, search and destroy mission, search and destroy, search for and destroy the enemy, or search for and destroy the enemy's supplies or his food. For the most part, you didn't wash, you slept very little on those operations. You ate sea rations out of a can, unheated, dried food. And it was always hot, it was blazing hot. There was a great deal of fear involved. You never knew when something was going to happen. The possibility existed that anybody could step on a mine. We had a certain tour to do. We had 13 months in Vietnam, and the days seemed longer than they were. The time seemed never to go away. The time seemed never to pass. And then there would be a firefight, and you could be in a firefight for 3 or 4 hours, and it felt like 10 minutes. A tour of duty in Vietnam as an infantryman was hours and hours of boredom, followed by seconds of sheer terror.
It is a timeless description of the infantryman's experience, for his essential features remain unchanging: the weapon, the pack, the helmet, and the eyes that have seen too much of that old, hard world that he knows so well. Hard world that he knows so well.